Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 107. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very, very special guest on the other side of the world in Australia, Cam Rosin. Cam, how are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me here. Happy to be here.
Of course. I was just telling you before we recorded that I just happened to stumble across one of your videos on social media, and it just resonated with me on such a deep level. I continued to do a deep dive, and every single video I watched, I found myself nodding my head in agreement of what you were saying. And so there are so many questions I have, but before we jump in, if you could introduce yourself to the audience who may or may not know who you are, how would you do that? What would you say?
It changes every time, but I would say that I am a plant medicine nurse educator by trade. So I work in the field of cannabis medicine, particularly the treatment of complex psychiatric disorders and complex comorbidities. But my main role is education and experimentation, like finding that beautiful blend of neuroscience and ancient wisdom and trying to converge those in a way that we can apply in everyday life to reduce suffering and optimize for joy, potential, and endurance.
I see what you did there. I like that. So to go back to childhood for you or wherever this all started, what got you interested in the ancient wisdom and the plant medicine to begin with?
Lucky curiosity, right? Curiosity paired with a tendency towards hyperfixation. And, it's something that is strange to even take credit for because I didn't even decide it. I decided to pursue and develop those interests, but it's really just the decision to listen to that curiosity and to use resonance and enthusiasm as your radar for choosing where you direct your attention. Um, I came into ancient philosophy when I started to need it. Like when I started to ask these questions, I go, well, what is this all about? Surely other people have asked this. And, as a young boy, you stumble across like Marcus Aurelius and you go, holy crap, this guy was an emperor, the most powerful person in the world at that time, but he still struggled to get out of bed. Like he still had the same undercurrent of humanity coursing through his veins. And from that, he would distill those lessons into wisdom that are equally applicable to today's age. And the way that ancient wisdom aligns with what modern neuroscience is saying is that really science is only just catching up to what these people were talking about thousands of years ago.
The way you speak just fires me up. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if it's the cadence. I don't know if it's the vocabulary. I don't know if it's just the energy that you speak with. It just gets me going. And so I can't wait to really go deep. And to start with that, I screen all the guests before the podcast with a few simple questions. One of those questions is, what is the hardest question that you've ever been asked? And your response to that in the questionnaire was, what are you afraid of? And I am curious to hear why that's such a hard question and what your answer is.
It's a hard question because I don't know, right? And we are in this age where there's a lot of cultural emphasis on doing the work, on doing the inner work, and that anyone we come across that appears to have, a lesson to share or wisdom to give, must have gone through hell to get that. And with that comes the fear. Like, what are we afraid of? Why are we doing what we are doing? And is there something driving this that is fearful? And it's a hard question for me because I don't know. I'm not cognizant of any fear that I have. And, people might say, well, that's just because you're not fully aware.
Mm.
But is it a requirement to live in fear when there really is nothing to fear? It's like people ask me, well, what kind of, awful things did you go through to learn what you learned? It's like maybe we don't have to go through awfulness to tap into wisdom. Like, maybe we can learn this from a place of joy and intrinsic motivation, and it doesn't need to come all from suffering. The suffering is an inevitable part of being alive, but how we frame that suffering and whether it is something that contributes to fear, and whether that suffering is, a requirement for character, or whether it's just something to navigate like everything else. Maybe it's a neutral thing, and that we
Mm.
don't need to ascribe so many stories to, the difficult experiences.
Okay, so we're going to take that. We're going to roll right into another question. Now, these next few questions are questions I ask every guest. But looking back at your life so far, and if you don't mind me asking, Cam, how old are you?
25.
Okay, so the past 25 years of your life, looking back at that, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you didn't choose for yourself? So you might describe that as suffering, or you might not, but what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle?
Mm. Um, Never being in one place as a kid, moving back and forth between Australia and the United States, which, two very easy countries to be in, all things considered. But as a kid, the embers of friendship need more constant stoking than as an adult, where you pick up where you left off. And so I think always being in that kind of liminal space of, all right, Cameron's here, but he's only here for a little while. He's only ever here for a little while. And then you get back and that whole friendship group has changed and people have moved on and think the dynamics are different. And so constantly needing to come back home and find home in yourself, find that security and esteem that is not so conditional based upon your immediate environment. When I first moved to Australia, I was devastated, but I was like 9 years old, and I was most upset because I was leaving my, childhood crush, and that was devastating at the time. I remember driving to the airport, listening to Coldplay, just crying in the back seat.
Classic.
And so
Uh,
that played a big factor for sure. Just solitude and
mm.
needing to find your own self.
Well, two questions. One, do you keep in touch with your childhood crush? Do you know what they're up to these days?
Um, I have a vague idea of what she's up to. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't kept in touch. I've kept in touch with all the other people from that childhood. Like, those friendships have lasted my entire life, but no, I haven't been keeping tabs on her.
Okay. Now, maybe she's listening to this podcast. If so, he's Cam's still thinking about you. But second question, which is a deeper question, finding home within yourself. I think that's such an interesting and powerful concept. What does that look like? Can you go deeper there and just explain more about what that looks like for you?
Mm. It's important to, reflect and introspect and see what is in you that appears to only be there because of something else. And what I mean by that is, um, we pin a lot of our hopes of happiness and a lot of our generation of happiness upon these external conditions, the people around us, the things that we do, the things that we own, the things that we want to own. And while those can all be fantastic conduits of emotion, right? Like, they all activate something within us. The key thing there is that it is within us. It is always occurring here. And developing a greater capacity to tune into that, the everything that is always within you, allows you to um, recognize what isn't actually critical or necessary for you to be content.
Mm.
And I'll use content instead of happy, because content is, I think, a more um, not a more realistic, but a more generalizable, I think that's a
Think
word.
so. Yeah.
More generalizable sensation. Content being, I'm okay with where I am and who I am and what I'm doing in this moment. And so much of that is being present, because we do so consistently live for another moment that in that process of living for another moment, we're always trying to escape where we are right now. And so a lot of being able to find home in you is being able to draw your attention and your awareness to what is in this present moment and just the sheer abundance of this moment. Like abundance meaning like the quality of the universe, just the everythingness of it all in every moment, like just phenomena emerging all the time out there in here, this constant back and forth symbiotic relationship with your environment. And there is always so much in that moment and so much within you that even by the paradox is that by becoming present, you really, and kind of shutting off your attention from anything that isn't in this moment right now, there is so much more
Mm.
to live for.
What do you think makes it hard to stay in the present? Because I know that's not something unique to you or I, but maybe something that is applicable to all human beings. Is it's challenging to be right here, right now, even though from a cerebral standpoint, it makes sense that this is all we have.
It's funny because we literally can't escape the present. Like it is the inescapable present moment. And we are always present, even if we don't think we are. There's so, again, cultural emphasis on being present. You got to be present. And, peeling back the layers of what that actually looks like, what that is where your attention is. And we have this incredible brain that was designed to deal with the immediacy of problems, right? Like it was a survival instinct. And we would use memories as this long-term data bank to be able to add context to whatever is happening right now. And with the meeting of our needs and the general, survival aspects of life being taken care of, like if you're listening to this podcast right now, it's likely that you have time, you have space, you have access to technology, you have the ability and the freedom to decide where your attention goes. And so if memories are just this collection of experience that helps to add context to this moment right now, but historically this moment has been about meeting those immediate needs. When those immediate needs are taken care of, the mind has nowhere else to go but to predict further and further. And so it's in this constant back and forth, using the past to predict the future, never really fully where you are right now. And you can even be engaged in a conversation like this one where I'm locked into the zone, and still there's parts of the brain that are not present. There's a part of the brain that's judging what I've just said, and the part of the brain that's judging what I'm about to say, taking away from the ability to speak what needs to be said in this moment. And so to become present is to really rewire this amygdala, this little fear center that's like, what's next? What's coming? What have I learned? And is this dangerous? And because of its inherent tendency to amplify the risk and amplify the danger, it starts to create that risk and danger because there is none in this immediate moment.
Mhm.
And in order to retrain this amygdala, it really is the practice of being present, which is continually redirecting your attention to what is now. The time, the date, the setting, where you are, the five senses, bringing yourself back into the body instead of in the hazy, ethereal landscape of the mind, which is limitless, right? Like the mind is limitless, and it's incredible just how far it can travel and still come back right here in just an instant.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm excited to do it. I would love to hear how the concept of uncertainty and dealing with uncertainty plays into being present versus not being present, looking forward versus being here, and how you view uncertainty. Because you recently spoke about that a bit on social media, and I thought what you had to say was really powerful. So, what does uncertainty look like in that equation?
Uncertainty is reality. Like I do have a radical acceptance of the overarching uncertainty of life. And it's only radical, really, when you're in resistance to it. Like, the parts of us that want to control can be very loud. And in order to really become at peace with the never-endingness of not knowing, we have to recognize that you can't possibly know. You literally cannot know anything until it has happened. And once you do know something, you actually knew what it was, because as soon as you describe that thing, you're describing what it was a moment ago. We can never fully capture anything, even in the present moment, let alone the moments to come. And this isn't to say that we don't plan and make conscious decisions that contribute to the future that we want to step into, but it is recognizing what is and is not in your control. And if it is not in this moment, it is not in your control, and therefore it is not known. So much of this is trusting this process, trusting that you do reap what you sow, you do get to harvest whatever seeds you plant. And by acting with that intention, like, what makes me feel good in this moment? What am I curious about right now? What could push the needle in my endeavors in this moment? Not thinking about how much there is to do all the time, because yeah, there's a lot to do all the time. There will be forever, but we are finite creatures, and we can't waste our time stressing about a future that has yet to come into existence.
I agree with all of that. And to play devil's advocate, I would say there are people who are thinking, Cam, I've planted seeds and I haven't reaped a reward. I've invested time and energy into things and my expectations haven't been met. I have put forth effort and the outcome that I had hoped for is nowhere in sight. And to those people who might not trust the process, who might not have faith that what they put out into the world will come back to them, what would you say to those people?
Well, great question. Several things. Number one is evaluate your expectations. Disappointment is avoidable. It is avoidable and also not necessary. Expectations, particularly the implicit expectations that we carry, right? Explicit being like, this is an expectation that I've said, that I've voiced, that I have made real and clear, almost like a standard of operation. Implicit is just the kind of unconscious biases that we carry around that tell us how things should be, how long things should take, what we should get in return. The real key to trusting the process is to act with intention and let go of expectation, again, in a radical way. If you are a person that is constantly disappointed, it's because you are constantly maintaining these expectations that apparently don't have any real substance or basis in reality. And it also means that you are constantly doing whatever you're doing in this moment for some future reward, which is, again, counterintuitive to getting the most out of this moment. If we are acting with this intention, and whatever your intention might be, like, ask yourself, what is my intention with today? What is my intention with this project? What is my intention with this next step of my career or this interaction? And ask your mind this question and see what it comes up with as an answer. Don't judge what it gives you. It's like, maybe my intention is to get rich. It's like, don't judge yet. Like, all right, that's meeting a need. That's something that you want to work towards. Fuck yeah, I'm glad that you know that. But things take longer than we think they're going to take. They always do, because whatever we see on the surface as an idea is a shell that is wrapped around countless hurdles and barriers and boundaries that we need to move through and transcend. And that is the process. The process is particularly at work when we don't think it's working. I've noticed that every time I felt like things are not working, it's because they actually are working to a greater rhythm and a greater scale, a greater order than I am consciously aware of. And this is the same kind of perspective I have with chaos. When life feels chaotic, it's not that life is chaotic, it's that I have a limited degree of awareness of the greater order at play right now. And then I'd also say, don't over evaluate your own performance. Like, okay, it didn't work. Instead of being like, well, the process doesn't work or it didn't work out, it's like, what can you do better? Like, iterate. You have to iterate. You have to be willing to honestly eat dirt and be like, all right, well, let's do it again tomorrow.
Mhm.
See what we could do better.
Oh man. Yeah. So there's a quote, and I'm blanking on who this came from, but it's about moving a pile of dirt. And the context is training, as in fitness, but I think it applies to any process. There's this giant pile of dirt, and some days you have a shovel and some days you have a spoon. But as long as you're moving dirt, that's all that matters. And I think that's very powerful. And it's showing up day in and day out and putting in the work. And I'm a firm believer that hard work works. However, I think people have trouble navigating that lag time between the effort and the expected outcome. And when things don't work, people tend to be disappointed, tend to get discouraged. Now, on the flip side, I have a quote. I love quotes. This one is from Jordan Peterson. It's on the lengthy side. I'm going to read it, and then I would love to hear your thoughts. He said, to straddle that fundamental duality is to be balanced, to have one foot firmly planted in order and security, and the other in chaos, possibility, growth, and adventure. When life suddenly reveals itself as intense, gripping, and meaningful, when time passes and you're so engrossed in what you're doing that you don't notice, it is there and then that you are located precisely on the border between order and chaos. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
What a beautiful string of words. Yeah, I straddle that line every day, dude. Like, I'm I'm walking that that razor's edge, and with that comes obviously its own challenges, its own difficulties. It's something that I wouldn't trade for the world, this dance between order and chaos. But it's also something like recognizing what in my nature is my nature, and what I am experiencing that is actually just a behavioral pattern that I can shift and change. Um, when I feel, because I work in the ideas space, like it's, let's speak an idea into existence and see what that does. Oh, let's try this out. It really is there's so many options to it that those options can be quite paralyzing. And when that optionality uh, increases and you feel like you're experiencing entropy, which is like that measurement of disorder within a system, when things start to feel chaotic, when you feel chaotic, simplify reality. Go work out, go walk, go to yoga, go do something that makes reality so simple, that brings you so firmly into the present moment, that all of that hazy, ethereal confusion of the thought realm is burned away like fog with morning sun. Like you get up to go to work early in the morning and there's fog blanketing the road and you can't really see, and then the sun comes out and it literally burns it away and you get that clarity. Movement simplifies reality. Sit in a sauna, just something that requires you to be fully attentive to whatever is occurring in this moment, because all of that, the combination of attention that is directed to this present moment paired with some kind of discomfort in the body, that balances out all of the discomfort in the mind that you experience, and it simplifies reality, and it allows you to make more thoughtful decisions around what you actually want to spend your time on. Because a big part of that, dancing between order and chaos is recognizing what kind of chaos is beneficial for you. The novelty of experience, the novelty of life. The only way that we can really generate novel ideas is by exposing ourselves to uncertainty, exposing ourselves to novel concepts, novel experiences. But something that can really disrupt that ordered chaos is being distracted, which injects a level of almost like unutilizable chaos. I can get distracted for weeks at a time if I'm not conscious.
So I am a firm believer that one of the overarching controllables in our life, and maybe the overarching controllable, is our choice, right? Our ability to choose. And with the power of choice, we can change parts of who we are. We can change the trajectory of our lives I'm curious if you believe there are parts of ourselves that are unchangeable. It's a kind of an odd question.
That's a great question. And something I don't have a full answer for that, because that is uncertain in itself. The DSM-5, the Western paradigm of psychology and medicine, for a long time has maintained the idea that traits are static. And I don't agree with that. I think that, again, back to that idea of what is our nature, but what is also being nurtured into us. And a lot of that nurturing can be recoded, rewired, unlearned, and consciously re-added when we nurture ourselves, when we nurture the person that we want to become, or when we have that image of who we want to become, and we use that person to nurture who we are right now. Um, Whenever somebody says, "Oh, I can't help it, that's just how I am," it's like bullshit. That's just something that you're unwilling to take responsibility for. It's like, I can't help that I'm impatient. It's like, yes, you actually can. You can become more patient. You can become more tolerant. You can become calm, less reactive, more decisive. You can become more okay with uncertainty, to the point where you can have a radical shift from fearing it to loving it and fully embracing it. Like, these are things that you absolutely can change. There are not many characteristics that are so static that we cannot change them, but you can't change them all at once. You don't need to change them all. And you should figure out what these, a lot of the flaws that we think we have are really our gateway towards freedom. These things that upset us about ourselves. It's like, all right, what do you actually want to change? What do you want to do here? Why is this bugging you? What are you going to do about it? Like, take responsibility.
It's a great question. What are you going to do about it? And I would encourage all the listeners to either pause this or write down that question and ask themselves at the end of this podcast, because that is powerful. You're absolutely right. Another component of all this is not what we think of ourselves. We don't live in a silo. It's what we think other people think about us. And actually, the post that I found you through was you talking about not to take things personally. And that, I believe the line you said was, they're not thinking what you think they're thinking. And the way you said it just drew me in. And I would love to hear more about how you view that, how you view comparison, how you view how we think about what other people might be thinking about us, and what role that plays in life.
Huge role. So that video was made after I read the Four Agreements for the first time. And that, if anybody has not read the Four Agreements, it is one of the most profound, easy to read, easy to engage with books you could possibly come across. It's like 90 pages. There's a free audiobook on YouTube. If you haven't listened to it, please do yourself a favor. It is life-changing. And agreement number 1 is be impeccable with your word. Agreement number 2 is don't take anything personally. Agreement number 3 is never make assumptions. And agreement number 4 is always do your best. And there's a lot to unpack in each of those domains, but each of those things is only really possible if you engage in the other things as well. And when it comes to not taking anything personally, even if it is a very personal remark, is that we are all projecting from our own inner kingdom. What we see in reality is a mirror. Some people have a lot more haze, again, that fog of the mind between themselves and the mirror. So they think that they're looking out a window, but what they see is reflected back at them. And when every interaction that you have with anybody is conditional upon what their inner state is, what their state of consciousness is. And that state of consciousness is built upon years and years and years of them receiving information and experience and consolidating that into their own personal worldview. And when you interact with anybody, that's what you are getting, is this hyper individualized perception of what the world is. And when we find ourselves thinking about what other people are thinking of us, all we are doing is thinking about ourselves with the added illusion of another party. Like, you can't know. Yes, you literally cannot know what they're thinking of you. And we also have the spotlight effect, which is, we're all walking around as if we have a spotlight over our head, just illuminating us, and everybody can see us and everybody's looking. It's like, no, because they're too busy in their own spotlight. They're too busy thinking about what you're thinking about them. And everybody is thinking about themselves, thinking that they're thinking about what other people are thinking. They're not.
There's a great book and speech by David Foster Wallace titled "This Is Water." Have you ever read or heard that, Cam?
No, let me write that down.
You would love it. So yeah, I won't go too far into it, but anybody listening to this, that is in addition to the four agreements, 20-minute YouTube video that I would highly recommend. And he starts off with this story about how these two young fish are swimming down a river, down a stream, and they're going, and this older fish is swimming the opposite direction. And as the older fish passes them, he says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" And they kind of just nod and wave and do their thing, keep swimming. And then eventually one of the younger fish turns to the other one and says, "What the heck is water?" And the whole talk, the whole book is about our awareness, and it's about a lot of the things that you've already touched on. And so it could be a great resource for anybody listening.
Fantastic recommendation. I can't wait to go hit that up. I mean, dude, this is one of the most important things that anybody could ever fully register, and it will take a while. If this isn't hitting right now, if it doesn't really click, if it's not making full sense, and you're getting a lot of, yeah, but what about this and what about that and but this, give it time. Allow your mind to continually ponder this subject. Bring it up into your awareness while you're interacting with people, and see how all of your interactions are shaped and formed dependent on what this inner state of consciousness is. Your state of mind, your state of body, your state of being is how you make contact with reality and thus yourself. When you are in a low mood, a negative mood, you're stressed, you can just see how your perception of the world is all funneled in via stressful pathways. You are more inflammatory. When you're driving, you're more easily pissed off. You're more sensitive to other people's energies and their bad moods, and you start to see it everywhere. And that's where, if you continue to entertain that and not disrupt that, not intervene, the feedback loop effect of that is that if you continually indulge, and I mean indulge in a real way, like there are big parts of the ego that want to be the victim, that want to be the one that's being hard done by, that want to be out there with a chip on the shoulder. We cannot tolerate that kind of thinking in our own minds, even for our own well-being. And it's like, oh, it's not that easy, dude. You're just saying to be positive. I'm like, no, it's a practice, dude, for sure. Like it takes a lot of willpower to wake up in the morning and go, I don't like these thoughts. What am I going to do about it? And then to actually do something about it, to disrupt that, to give yourself some space in order to be able to consciously choose how you are going to engage and relate with the world. That is where your power is in deciding, how do I intend to show up for myself and thus the world? And that intention, if you can really clarify that intention, that aligns your subconscious activity with that conscious intention and helps to take some of the argument with the world out of the equation. And so that you are at least more harmonized within yourself, and thus a better tool for navigating the trials of existence.
So well said. And for anybody who wants a similar message packaged a bit differently, and maybe this resonates, I often think of, going back to the thought of seeds. If you or I went outside today and we planted a tomato plant, we put a seed in the ground, and then we went out tomorrow and we were frustrated, disappointed, confused as to why there's not a tomato plant. That's not how it works. And as humans, we all understand that there's a process, and we have to make sure that it's getting sunlight. We have to water it. We have to pick the weeds. We have to tend to this thing over time and be patient with the process. And I think with thoughts, sometimes that is really, really challenging, because we hear it, we process it, and we say, I can't make the change. And then we give up on it. And we think because it didn't work immediately that it didn't work. But I would say, tend to it, nurture it, make sure the soil is good, give it some sun, pick the weeds, give it water, and give it time.
Man, I love that. And also, I just want to circle back to, um, back to expectations and, well, I'm doing the things, but it's not working out how I thought it would. What I'm discovering is that often, if you don't think it's working or it's not bending to the timeline that you had originally, it's because what you're planting is greater than what you think you're going to receive. Like, I planted my garden. I come back. It's been a couple months. It's been a couple years. I haven't got this return yet. It's like, yeah, maybe you planted an oak tree. Maybe this is bigger. Maybe this idea that doesn't feel right yet. It's because you're actually thinking too small. Like you are setting you're feeling small, you're thinking small, you're acting small, your expectations are meager, and nature is not going to support a meager approach. It supports the bold and the big thinking. And I doubting the process is a necessary part of learning to trust it.
Can you expand on that?
Critical thinking, right? Like this isn't a blind faith, but it also is something that trusting the process requires us to trust something beyond our immediate senses. And that means doubting the immediacy of this moment in some ways. Like we have to trust that what we are working towards, it really does exist and will manifest in physical reality. We can trust that. And that means looking around at what maybe has already manifested and being like, well, this isn't the whole truth. Like there are things in life that I could never have expected, people I never thought I would meet, things I never thought I would do. And all of that, I can look at that and go, wow, isn't it amazing how things pan out, how these connections emerge, how life really does favor and support me pursuing this curiosity, and that I could never have seen how these things stacked up until I had the hindsight to look back and see those connections. And to doubt the process is at least meaning that you are thinking critically about it. It means that you are walking the line between delusion and prophecy in a cognizant manner, right? Because if you don't doubt anything, if you are completely certain, that's when you get snuck up on. That's when you get taken by surprise, and not the surprise of like, oh yes, reality is doing what reality does, but like, okay, I did not prepare for this at all. Mentally, I'm not prepared for this. Like, people get stuck on things for a long time. Like, oh, should we have done that? Should we have made that purchase? Should we have done that thing? Should I have, bought that ticket? It's like, those are things that are done. Where are you? Like, where are you? Can you come back to where you are right now? Can you come back to where your feet are? Because people spend a large majority of their lives living anywhere but where they are.
Another amazing question that I would say, hey, pause this podcast, write that down, and ask yourself that, and really think about it. Don't just ask it. What you just said reminded me of episode 30 of this podcast with Igor Torres, who was the first one to introduce me to the phrase "fortune favors the brave." And I agree with you. I think that boldness is rewarded. I think that oftentimes we don't think too big, we think too small. But I think we fear that we are thinking too big too often. Now, one more thing, and then I'd love to hear more thoughts on your end, is that commitment is only possible. True commitment is only possible when doubt is present. If the outcome was certain, if there was no doubt, there would be no need to commit. And I think that commitment is a very powerful thing. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts there.
For sure. But that commitment needs to have a why. Like, why am I committed to this thing? Otherwise, it's empty, monotonous, and the death of memory. Like, to be stuck in a routine that is unquestioned and unexamined. I really do struggle to commit to anything that I'm not intrinsically interested in. And when I am interested in it, then I'm not just committed, I'm devoted. And devoted is a different flavor of discipline, because it really is this intrinsic giving. It's an acting in service of this intention, of this ambition, of this mission, of this purpose. Whereas discipline is like, all right, I can discipline myself in accordance with strict parameters. But devotion is, to me, something that is really conducive to embodying, like embodying something, and it creates space for natural inconsistencies. Like, I'm not a robot. I'm very much human, and back to that Jordan Peterson quote, the dance of order and chaos is a real thing, and I'm learning to embrace that and create space for that, and space for the different types of disruption and chaos that go on inside of me. I think that when you do commit to something, though, when you really make a decision, nature supports decisions. Like, you decide something, not a half-ass, like, oh, I might try it out. It's like, no, I'm going to try this. Like I decided to show up. That's just what I decided. And understanding that you don't have to justify that to everybody as well, because we do have this higher intuition, this energetic radar that kind of pulses us in different directions. And often those directions are unknowable to our subconscious mind that is built on the past. We are trying to use this subconscious machine to ask that intuition, like, all right, well, why am I doing this? Where is this going? What does this mean? What do I get? And intuition's like, that's not for you to know, dude. You're here to deal with whatever's in this moment. I'll continue to guide you in this direction. Just trust me. Trust that I got your back. Trust that you cannot know until you get there. And if we find it difficult to make a commitment to a single thing, which I always have, like, I'm diverse and interested in many things, and therefore, someone might look at me and go, oh, he lives a life of total impulsivity and no commitment at all. But I'm deeply committed to finding out what I'm capable of. I'm committed to discovering what is possible, what the potential, what that field of the unknown has in store. I am committed to making a difference. I'm committed to showing up. I'm committed to learning and healing and growing. And those commitments are something that we can all make with ourselves without having to attach it to some kind of external thing.
So all of the things you just mentioned are hard, challenging things. The process of pursuing potential, of discovering what's possible, of being devoted and making decisions. Those are all hard things. When you look back at your 25 years so far on this earth, what is the hardest singular thing that you've chosen to do on purpose in pursuit of that potential and possibility?
I'd say, look, studying nursing was a slog of a thing, because in Australia you work for months and months in hospitals for free, and that's good. It's experience, but then immediately getting that degree and be like, I'm not going to use this how everybody says I should use this. Like, are you going to get the job in a hospital? I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think I vibe with the fluorescent lights and the beeps and all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna join this emerging industry of cannabis. And at the time, it was barely legal. Nobody knew about it. It was such a little baby of a space. And I'm like, I'm gonna go for this. And everybody was like, this is an insane decision. There's nothing to back this up. There's no reason that we can think of that this is a good idea. You have the job already there. Take the job. No. Like, I think to sum it up, it's like, if you really do want to discover those things, discover that potential, discover your path, you have to be really willing to look wrong in the eyes of everybody else. And that's something that I've done forever. Still learning to do. Like, often to pick what is right for you, it is likely going to look wrong for the people that are not in the arena.
You use the word arena there, and I am wondering if you are familiar with the "Man in the Arena" quote by Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, one of the best ever.
Oh yeah, it's on my wall right next to my desk. It's one of my favorites. I've shared it before on the podcast, and I think that's so well said. Making the right decision for you will likely look like the wrong decision for so many other people. Are there certain people in your life where it's been harder to navigate that with, whether that be family, friends, people that you admire, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky to have been raised in a super open-minded family. That immediate family was very, encouraging of pursuing curiosity and that there's no right path and that you can find your own way. Um, a lot of that is honestly being okay with even yourself having doubts, because again, the intuition, this higher thing might tell you that this is where you should go, but you might not have any justification for that yourself. And so you're dealing with all of the doubt of the world absorbed in your little mind, being like, is this the right decision? It's like, make the decision. Is this right? Is it wrong? You cannot know. You cannot make any assumptions. Back to that, the second agreement or third agreement. Um, Definitely there are people that, especially friends, like it's strange when you start doing the social media stuff and putting your voice out there. What I find you're most scared of, or uncertain of, self-conscious of, is what my friends from high school think. Will they get it? Probably not. That's okay. It's not for them. You got to be willing. It's like, how many people are actually oppressing themselves and their expression because of what they think a couple of people from their school days might think.
Mm.
It's like, dude, there's a globe of people out there. There are so many people in your tribe. You already belong with these people and you haven't even met them yet. All you have to do is use your voice.
I think
So
one of
that's
Yeah, well, one of the many lessons I've learned through social media is that there are so many people on this earth that are willing to walk alongside you, support you, encourage you, that agree with you on many things and disagree. And I think the agreements and disagreements are equally important. And I don't think we should shy away from confrontation. However, there's a quote that stands out above the rest. It's from Nietzsche. I never know if I'm saying his last name appropriately. I think you would probably know.
neither.
I'm assuming. You don't know?
I
Um,
think it is Nietzsche.
okay. And he said, those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music. And I think to your point, the music that you and I may be dancing to might not be the music that other people around us are dancing to. And that is okay if they don't hear our music. And it doesn't mean we should stop dancing.
Hmm. Dude, amen to that. That music as well. I think it can be heard by many. It's just that some are not willing to hear yet. Like the
Mhm.
music plays for all of us. Are you willing to listen? Because, hearing through obstructed ears is not the same as listening. Just like seeing through obstructed eyes, like feeling through an obstructed heart. Right? We're all carrying around our own obstructions to that direct contact with reality. Again, like we see this mirror, but there's the hazy realm of thought in between us, and we have these senses that have a far greater capacity of perception than what makes it to our conscious mind, because it's filtered through just so many convoluted individualistic neural pathways, and those pathways are obstructions. The amount of data that comes in via your senses versus what I'm actually aware of in this moment, dude, barely even a fraction, doesn't make a dent. Like what I'm aware of in this moment, I like to think that I'm aware, but like I'm still so limited in my perception. And when we can really fully embrace how limited that perception is, even that starts to dissolve some of those barriers to perception. And we can start to hear more of the music, see this rhythm that is always occurring, always in flow. And we can start to live a life of more flow by recognizing, oh shit, maybe I already am in flow. Maybe I'm inescapably present and always in flow.
I love that. Now, all of the things that we've been talking about in this podcast, they require endurance. They require us to continue moving forward. This is the Project Endure podcast. And so when you hear the word endurance, what does that mean to you?
Mm. It's the willingness to find your edge and be able to soften while you're at that edge. Like endurance is, I think it has such hard connotations because it is hard. It's challenge. Endurance we don't have to endure anything that's not difficult. We just sit through it. But endurance is, to me, the ultimate flex is to be in a uncomfortable position just beyond where you thought you could be, and then invite softness into that. And I mean, like, even just physically, you're in a challenging pose, you're on a difficult run. Can you soften your jaw? Can you soften your forehead? Can you relax your neck? Can you let your shoulders drop down? Can you soften? Because to soften requires a lot of strength. Like, to soften when your body is tense, when your mind is tense, when it just, everything's got an edge to it. It requires strength to soften into that, and to bring a little smile to your lips, even when you're literally suffering. Like, that is endurance to me. We endure because we must and because we can. We endure because we are gifted with the opportunity to see what we are capable of, and we can't let that go to waste.
That is one of the most unique and one of my favorite answers to that question that I've gotten in over 100 episodes. And it reminds me of a phrase that a good friend and client of mine once spoke to me, and they said, "We can do hard things without hardening." And that's what that made me think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Now, there's been so much here that I think will resonate with people, will be of value to the people listening. Like I told you before the podcast, there's so many people listening to this who are fighting their own battles. Some out in the open, some behind closed doors. Everyone is struggling with something, right? Life is hard. If you could speak to somebody who's just going through it right now and just they're not sure where to go or what to think about or what to do, and they just need some words of encouragement, some guidance, and you get to give that to them, what would you say?
You have more than you realize, more capacity, more capability, more endurance, more strength. Don't worry about how everything is going to be. Bring yourself back to where you are and ask yourself, how do I want to feel? It can really be as simple as that. How do I want to feel today? How do I want to feel tomorrow? I want to feel good. Okay. What can I do that allows that goodness to emerge? Because everything emerges from its conditions. What are the conditions of your happiness? What are the conditions of your peace of mind? What are the conditions of feeling good within yourself and feeling connected to, your environment, your purpose, your place? Just ask yourself, how do I want to feel? And then engage in those things with the intention of feeling that way. And that becomes a habit. And that the compound interest of those little decisions over time can create a life well beyond our wildest imaginations. Give yourself space, give yourself patience, give yourself compassion, and trust the process, brother.
Cam, thank you so much. Not only for that answer, but for this whole conversation and for everything that you're about. And for anybody listening to this who wants more of this conversation sprinkled into their social media feed just on a regular basis, where is the best place for people to find and follow you?
Instagram at Cam Rosin, my podcast, This Might Be Helpful. And then I have a community, the This Might Be Helpful community, which is really, about walking each other home, walking next to each other as we uncover these questions and go on these journeys, because we all have this multi-potentialite, multi-passionate quality to us. And I think fully embracing that is better with friends.
I couldn't agree more. And I hope people will go check that community out, check the podcast out. I can vouch, I've listened. It's really good stuff, and just follow along with you and connect. And just thank you again for this. I really appreciate you.
Dude, I appreciate you too. Thank you for such a beautiful conversation. And you're a really, really solid interviewer. So just well done on practicing that craft.
Thank you so much, Cam.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.